Tensions between the United States and China have escalated following Beijing's decision to impose sanctions on 13 American defense companies in response to U.S. arms sales to Taiwan. Announced on December 5, 2024, these sanctions target firms involving in military manufacturing, freezing their assets and restricting business interactions within China. The Chinese government views the arms sales as a direct threat to its sovereignty and territorial integrity, intensifying the geopolitical friction between the two nations. This situation raises crucial questions about the future of the United States and China relations and regional security dynamics. Welcome to In Depth. Earlier, China has banned shipments to the United States of several minerals and metals used in semiconductor manufacturing and military applications, in a swift retaliation by Beijing against new export controls from Washington. Chinese Ministry of Commerce stated that it would prohibit the export of dual-use items to the United States and impose stricter controls on graphite. Additionally, the ministry accused Washington of weaponizing trade and technology under the guise of national security. This retaliation followed the United States' imposition of another round of sweeping export controls aimed at hindering China's development of artificial intelligence for military purposes. The stakes are rising in U.S.-China relations as China imposes sanctions on 13 U.S. military firms in direct response to recent U.S. actions concerning Taiwan. This began when Taiwan's president visited Hawaii and the U.S. territory of Guam during a trip to the Pacific, prompting condemnation from China. These sanctions follow China's strong objection to U.S. approving a $385 million sale of spare parts and support for F-16 jets to Taiwan, which Beijing claims undermines its sovereignty and territorial integrity. The issue of arms sales has been one of the most disputed aspects of how Washington and Beijing interpret Taiwan's status. In this context, the New York Times highlighted the latest Chinese sanctions targeting U.S. military firms. According to the newspaper, China's foreign ministry stated that Washington approval last month of $387 million defense package for Taiwan had seriously damaged China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. In announcing the sanctions, Beijing invoked its recently established anti-foreign sanctions law, which is part of an expanding array of countermeasures that mirror many of the punitive actions that the United States takes against China. The newspaper also questioned the incoming Trump administration's stance on Taiwan, noting that Trump has sent mixed signals regarding his support for the island's democracy.
China has escalated tensions with the United States by imposing sanctions on 13 American military companies and their executives, effective December 5, 2024. This move comes in response to Washington's recent arms sale to Taiwan, which Beijing views as direct violation of its sovereignty and territorial integrity. In retaliation, China has also announced a ban on exporting certain critical minerals to the US, material vital for military applications. This decision intensifies the ongoing trade and geopolitical frictions between the two nations. The sanctions were prompted by the Biden administration's approval of a $387 million arms deal with Taiwan, which includes components for fighter jets. This marks a significant moment in U.S.-China relations, reflecting ongoing geopolitical tensions surrounding Taiwan's statute and military support from the U.S. The U.S. government and affected companies are expected to respond strategically. Diplomatic efforts are likely to play a key role as officials seek ways to mitigate the impact of these sanctions. Additionally, Companies may explore alternative markets for their products or take legal action to challenge the sanctions. Diversifying supply chains to reduce dependence on Chinese materials could also be critical focus. The sanctions could significantly impact arms sales to Taiwan, potentially limiting its access to advanced military technology. This may weaken Taiwan's defense capabilities while emboldening China's assertive stance toward the island. Such developments complicate US efforts to support Taiwan's security without further escalating tensions with Beijing. On a global scale, the deteriorating US-China relationship is expected to disturb supply chains and unsettle financial markets as investors react to heightened uncertainty. Countries in the Asia-Pacific region, heavily reliant on economic ties with both superpowers, may find themselves navigating a delicate balancing act.
For more analysis, we are joined by Penny Koch, an economic expert from Hong Kong, and also we are joined by Frank Mosmar, an international affairs expert from Texas. Welcome, and we have the utmost pleasure to have you on the show. Mr. Mosmar, we start with you. What are the primary motivations behind China's decision to impose sanctions on 13 US defense firms, and why is the timing significant in your view, sir?
Yes, thank you. I don't think it's more than a diplomatic move. China came out with a new law, the anti-foreign sanction law, and I think it's trying just to match, the political actions of the United States globally. I will say it's not more than just a sign, which is sent not to Washington, maybe to other countries that they are in the hemisphere of Washington, not to go with the same direction of Washington, because those companies anyway, they are deterred, and there are regulations in the United States that forbid them anyway from doing business in China. We're not talking about Taiwan, China, and investment or traveling even to China. So I don't see it more than a diplomatic move, not more than anything else.
Sir, how do you read this decision? Do you think it's a rational decision or a non-rational decision?
Well, from China now, most people think and attach the latest developments to Trump's era, like Trump is going to come to power. But most of the developments that happened between China and the United States concerning Taiwan happens during Mr. Biden's time. During Mr. Biden's time, Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, and then the extra taxes that was imposed on China by the Biden administration for the semiconductors and for the electric cars and electric car batteries, which is reached around 100%. People not highlighting that, just trying to bring the issue that Donald Trump, because he is talking about it loudly, not in a political manner. Most people thinking that China is preparing itself for that newcomer of Donald Trump. But basically, it is the strategic interest of the United States in the last 10 years towards that area. China most of the time complain about the relationship between Taiwan and the United States based on the Taiwan Relation Act that was, I think, initiated in 1979. And then they complain that the United States, even though they made a new agreement.
Okay, sir, I'll leave it there, and I'll go to Mr. Penny Koch. Welcome, sir. Sir, what immediate economic impacts do you foresee for the sanctioned U.S. defense firms following China's recent sanctions in response to arms sales to Taiwan, sir?
So I would say thank you for inviting me for the discussion. Yeah. I would say the China's sanctions against the U.S. military firms and the personnel is just any related selling those technology and products, any weapons to China. So that's why China would have the so-called rooms to sanctions those military firms and personnel, because those military firms and personnel would not have any formal linkage with China, because U.S. prohibits them to do so. So it is. We would say it is just a diplomatic move, because U.S. sells the weapons.
So, sir, you agree with Mr. Musmar that it's a diplomatic move?
Yeah. I will agree with the other guests as well. Yes.
Okay. Do you see, sir, at this point that this decision is rational or not rational, sir?
I would say rational, because it is a safe move. Because China have to react for any U.S. in Beijing's eyes, U.S. any actions from the Washington for supporting Taiwan, allowing, for example, like the president lied to bypass Hawaii and then go to the U.S., and any sanctions, any actions from the Washington for supporting Taiwan democracy, or anything about the sovereignty questions of Taiwan, the Beijing has to react and has to oppose again. So because this time the Washington sells the weapons to the Taipei, and then Beijing has to react. So that's why Beijing to announce.
So you agree, sir, at this point?
Yeah.
And at this timing. Okay, we go back to Mr. Musmar. How do these sanctions reflect the broader geopolitical tensions between the United States and China, sir? And how do you read the narrative of Mr. Pennycock that you just listened to, sir?
Okay, well, as I said before, the relationship between the United States and China, if we consider that from an economic perspective, or Taiwan perspective. So economic perspective, that's an ongoing diplomacy based on the taxes and tariffs and products been distributed here and there based on each one strategical influence. Now, when talking about Taiwan is different, because China is looking at Taiwan as a piece of its land, and the United States looking for its own sovereignty, and there is agreement between the United States and Taiwan. So of course that will be always annoying to Taiwan, to China, and China retaliation was basically based on Taiwan subject, not based on the future relationship with the United States and whatever Donald Trump is talking about, new tariffs and stuff like that. So when we're talking about Taiwan, there is an act that has been imposed by the United States, and the United States is committed to it. Even though there is an agreement that happens after that in 1982 between China and the United States to decrease the arms sales to Taiwan for peaceful resolutions, but China is not saying that it's a good move from the United States, especially by the United States, approving a package sale of weapons equal to 387. So that's considered from Chinese that it's threatened to their sovereignty.
Perfect. Mr. Pennycock, can you answer Mr. Musmar, please, and comment on what he just said?
How should I say? That is, okay. For now, both China and United States, both countries are now preparing for the so-called decoupling. That is because, yes, as we all know, the U.S. and the Western the companies of the Western countries, or even like the Japan and South Korea, they are now preparing for their supply chain. Yes, one is for China's market, and one is for to try to what should I say is to try to move their supply chain to the other countries in Southeast Asia, in the India as well. They try to de-risk. That is because during the COVID era, we all know, because the global supply chain, the global production lines relies on China too much, and also because of the Southeast Asia, Japan, and even Europe, and even the US, and seeing the geopolitical risk between China and US is rising, the companies have to do something, or even the countries in Europe and Southeast Asia have to do something that is okay. We know maybe the war is coming. We doesn't know when the war will break out. So before the war broke out, they need to do some preparations. That is the first and the biggest concern. That is to protect the business, protect the trade, and then that's why for the Western on the Western side, they are trying to putting more effort and money and trying to put more balance on their supply chain on the Southeast Asia, India as well. Okay, for the China side, yes, and China knows the Western is moving out. So that's why China is, and also China is knows that Washington is going against the country. So that's
okay,
why China
Mr.
is
Musmar,
also,
what do you think of what Mr. Peacock is saying now?
Well, I don't buy there is a country against country. You know, we're
You
talking
don't
about
buy it, sir?
strategic. I don't buy that language. You know, there is nothing called country
Why don't
against
you buy
country.
it?
Because in countries' relationship, that's strategical interest. Each country is looking at strategical interest. I'm not saying that United States is going against China or China going against United States. And actually, like, you just look at the Mr. Trump cabinet pick as an example. Marco Rubio as an example. He is one of the pro-Taiwanese as an example. And he's the guy that he is with to keep, the idea of semiconductors being in Taiwan. So here is that mixed message as an example, because Donald Trump is talking about tariffs against China, while his pick, Marco Rubio, is very sentiment against or with the Taiwanese. So what I'm trying to say by my example is, there is no countries against countries. It does not work like that. It's not, 1960s anymore. So there is strategical interest, which is whatever good for the United States is going to do. Now, whatever good for China as well. So that's why China, when it came with the anti-foreign sanctions laws, didn't bring it against the United States. It bring it as a national law that is going to apply it against many, from their perspective, many competition or many people that they work against their will. So definitely, this is not a law directed to the United States directly. So we're not talking about a war here. We're talking about strategical interest.
Mr. Koch, Mr. Musmar doesn't buy what you said.
What I'm just saying is, okay, the Western side is preparing for I would say preparing for the worst, and China is also preparing for the worst scenarios. That is, China is knowing the United States and its allies is moving out the supply chain out of China. And also, that's why it is one of the biggest motives for China to develop its relations with the Middle East. And of course, because with Russia, because of supporting Russia during the Ukraine crisis. And also, you are seeing China is putting a lot of effort in the recent 2 or 3 years on developing its relations with the Saudi Arabia and UAE and even the whole Middle East. Yes, China is leveraging the decline in the United States and the Middle East, because the Middle East, led by the Saudi Arabia and the UAE, is finding more economic capitals and finding more, as I've said, leverages against the United States, so that because Middle East needs more partners, and that's why we're seeing the MENA, that is Middle East and the China, they have the strategic mutual interest.
Okay, sir, what are the potential long-term consequences for American companies operating in China as a result of these sanctions, sir?
Yes? Hello?
Yes, sir. I was just asking you a question now. I was asking you, what are the potential long-term consequences for American companies operating in China as a result of these sanctions?
So you mean the China sanctions? I mean, the sanctions you mean is the China sanctions of the military companies, right? Or the general sanctions, or maybe the technology or the other else. Can I clarify?
Sir, both. Everything that's happening, that's taking place now.
Okay. Okay.
And the sanctions that we're discussing now.
Okay, especially the technology side, yes, because recently China is not only just restrict the strategic raw materials to the United States, and even the China inside China, especially China semiconductor manufacturing side is also suggesting not to buy the U.S. Semiconductor or maybe the chips or maybe technology as well, because they know U.S. is going to ban them, and U.S. That's why, and China knows they need to build their own supply chain to try to protect to produce their own chips in order to avoid any U.S. sanctions. So for the U.S. companies, I would say the sensitive technologies they won't have any economic benefits in China anymore.
Okay, sir, I'll leave it there. Mr. Musmar, what messages are Washington and Beijing sending through their recent actions regarding Taiwan, and how do these align with the foreign policy goals of the United States and China?
Okay, well, as I told you,
it's very complicated.
No, but it's not complicated, but it's two different subjects. So Taiwan, we already talked about it. It's very, very clear, direct to the point. Now, when you're talking about the economy and exactly what your guest was saying, United States company is going to China. They're going for two things, for cheap and skilled labors. But there is too many competition now within the hemisphere of China. India, some other countries, they do have the same thing. So once the United States companies start going to China, it doesn't mean that they have to stay in China. And actually, there's so many skilled workers now and more technology in Mexico, which is actually very close, and south of the United States will be much better. And actually, for us, we learned from the mistakes during COVID problem for the supply chains from China was too much of a headache, and it was interrupted big time. So the United States companies, they look at their interest. And from that point, yeah, it could be China, could be somewhere else. But for now, it's not the China subject. It is the skilled worker and cheap laborers, which is now available everywhere. So it's not like, let's not just take it that we are in a war, in an economic war against China. But
so sir, you read it as an economic war?
I'm sorry?
You read it as an economic war?
No, I don't read it as an economic war, but in diplomacy you could say that.
That is what you just
but
said,
in reality, no. Maybe I was trying to indicate to something else. But what I'm saying, it shouldn't be considered as an economic war. But in diplomacy we say that. But at the end, it's an interest, business interest point. So the United States companies, when
you mean, sir, mutual interest? I just want to elaborate to the viewers. Do you mean mutual interest between both countries?
The mutual interest in business and in strategical interest, it exists everywhere, and it's been everywhere. So now, just because the China is a rising power, it doesn't mean the United States is officially in a war against China. And people are trying to implicate that in diplomacy, but in reality, it's a mutual interest. It's a business. So when the United States...
In light of the sanctions, sir, how is this mutual interest going to go on?
Well, when we're talking about sanctions, we're talking about now military sanctions. And as I told you before, this new anti-foreign sanctions law that the United States imposed, it did not impose against the United States. It's a new strategical move from China against many countries, which is, I think, it's imposed against the hemisphere, the countries that they work in the hemisphere of the United States. So they're trying to affect their decisions not to go the same direction, supporting Taiwan or supporting something that it's against the interest of China. So the point is, it's not a full war. It's just a tactical move, a diplomacy, just to deter.
So you read it as a tactical move, sir?
I'm sorry?
You read it as a tactical move?
It is a tactical move. That, when we talk in politics is not just like what's said in the media. There's so many things into it. When we were talking about tariffs is not economy. Tariff is the tool of economy. So I impose tariff just to impose something else or add pressure on my components, so I will maybe get some more leverage here and there. So it's not a war, it's just how we describe it.
That was Penny Cock, an economic expert from Hong Kong, and also we were joined by Frank Mosmar, an international affairs expert from Texas. Thank you very much for your informative knowledge and insights. That brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.